have a microphone, so I'm going to try to speak loudly so everyone can hear. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out here this afternoon for this field dedication for a friend and coach. We have a number of people that are going to come up and speak, but before we do that, I'd like to call Frank's family, his wife Rosie, his daughter Amber, and his son Ian. They would come up, and we'd like to unveil the sign before we talk about Frank. Number of people we'd like to thank before we get started. Mike Stein and CMA Block, Boats Equipment Rental, Fritz Danilovich, Class of 2014, the Adams Family Farm, and Gillespie Signs. I'd like to personally thank Derek and Jen and the soccer family for all the hard work they did in putting this all together. I'd like to now call up Mr. Leo Shue, who's a friend and former coach.
Good afternoon. It's great to see so many people out here today to help dedicate this field for Frank. But I really don't know whether he'd approve. Because you see, for Frank, soccer was never about the individual. It was always about the team. It wasn't about the coach. Driving over this afternoon, I saw all the yellow and purple jerseys out on the fields over in Elysburg, and it brought to mind that the first time Frank and I met, we were coaching our kids in Shamokin AYSO. He walked up to me after a coaches meeting one time and began talking to me like he had known me our whole lives. And I thought to myself, who is this guy? Well, over the next quarter century, I found out. I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise when about a year later, Frank came up to me and, using the persuasive powers that he had, began to extol the merits of learning the laws of the game. How it would make me a better coach. It would make my team a better team. Hell, it would even make me a better person. And coincidentally, I could help him rep in Shamokin AYSO because, you see, Frank had been appointed the chief referee in the AYSO program. So, for those of you that only knew Frank in his high school incarnation, rest assured that his love for the laws of the game and for those people delegated to enforce those laws went way, way back. Over the years, Frank and I went to many games together and went to numerous coaching courses. And the one thing that always amazed me was the way he could pick out the little details that made a difference. You'd look at somebody on the field and say, see number 10 over there? See the way when she turns left, she does a little stutter step, and that's when they're taking the ball away. He would catalog all these things, put these things in the back of his mind, and he wouldn't forget them. And 2 or 3 years later, when he would see that same girl, maybe in the playoffs, he would use that information that he had gleaned from a couple years earlier to help his team win. So Frank's attention to detail, his phenomenal memory, the way he could talk to you one-on-one, relate to you, and his persuasive powers were just a few of the things that made Frank the best soccer coach I ever met, and a wonderful friend. Thank you.
If Becky Stamets would come up and say a few words. Becky's Southern Columbia class of 1999.
Thanks. My name is Becky Stamens. I was a forward for the 1995 through 1998 girls soccer program. We were the first graduating class of the program, the first elite champions, the first district champions, and the first Eastern finalists. Frank, Rosie, Amber, and Ian were simply a part of my family growing up, as was Leo, really. They're still my neighbors. I just moved back to the area, and there weren't many other houses that I spent as much time in my youth. Frank was my soccer coach well beyond the field that's behind us. We started with Leo in AYSO, with the Mohicans, and FC Shadow Club, and then finally the high school team. Jen asked me to speak about a month ago, and since that time I was really just reflecting on all of the different types of stories and memories that I had, and I didn't know where to start. And it just so happened that I moved back to the area about 6 months ago, and with that move, I guess, gave the green light to my parents to pack up all of my belongings from high school, art projects, awards, etc., and place them quietly on my back porch. I know this because this transaction transpired last weekend when I woke up and found numerous boxes laying there. So, last weekend, just ironically, I spent countless hours sitting in my basement looking through the different, boxes and treasure chests, reading the hundreds of soccer articles, the hundreds of club patches that we got at all the tournaments growing up in pictures. It was then that I was flooded with a lot of memories, thinking about the awesome time of just high school and how much soccer meant to me, the accomplishments that our team had, the obstacles we truly had to overcome, and the bond that we shared. So now I could go on forever, obviously, sharing and reminiscing about the funny stories, our deep friendships and memories, we all could. But I just want to take a moment to talk about a couple of things that really I remember Frank about. So I found this picture that I apparently drew when I was a senior in high school. And this picture just really goes to show you the impact that Frank had on my life. I sat in art class drawing him. Although this picture shows you that, yes, he was my coach, but he went far more than that to me. In fact, with our assistant coach, Mary, he was just really a great friend and mentor. And this picture shows you that he loved food, he loved the outdoors and photography. So just a couple things about food. Do you remember, and I don't know how many people are here from our class growing up, but how much trouble we would get into when after we won or lost and went to Haas's, or went to Red Lobster, we were obnoxious. And I think that a lot of the members of our team were motivated by food to win. And Amber and I, growing up, spent the most amount of time in Mr. Donut in Shamokin, after games and eating those delicious breadsticks, and this was way long before it was called Dunkin' Donuts, and I can still tell you how many ice cubes Frank prescribed in his coffee. So, along with food, Frank even had an influence on my music preferences. So Amber, I remember every one of your dad's cars growing up, right? So he used to pull up to my driveway. I used to cram into the back seat of his VW Rabbit. We were really quiet, and we were going to Shamokin to practice. Amber was always in the front, sitting quietly with her gym bag on her lap, either happy or miserable. And, either The Chain or some sort of 1970s hippie song was always blasting. And that is still one of my favorite songs, and every single time I hear Fleetwood Mac, I remember Frank. And that drive to Shamokin is still one of my favorite car rides. So when I think about high school soccer and Frank, I don't really remember the winning goals, the scores of the games. I can't tell you who the great players of the league were at that time. But what I do remember is the feeling that I get when I think about our awesome team, our friendships, and the bond that we had. It was one of the best times of my life. So it occurred to me when I was sitting on my basement floor, reading through all of the interviews and the videos and the pictures, watching those things about Frank, what really made Frank special was the fact that he had my back. He had our backs. The thing was, he was the proudest of us, and he was our biggest fan. He was a good coach, that goes without saying, obviously, and he was tough. But he believed in me, and he believed in us, so much that he grew this program. And that I'm grateful for. There is no other person that this field should be named after. Thank you, family, for asking me to speak in Frank's name.
Thank you. Class of 2002, Aaron Spots.
this is not far from the norm. Truthfully, Frank wouldn't have expected anything less. See, usually he was the one giving me the hard time about wearing my heart on my sleeve, or laughing at me as I showed up for the first day of practice my senior year going, this is the last first practice I'm ever going to do. And he's going, seriously, Aaron, it's the first day. Yeah. So there's so much that I could say, and Jen told me I needed to be brief. So I'm going to be totally honest with you. When I first met Frank, he scared the Jesus out of me. He was this big, burly guy who reminded me of a grizzly bear. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy who just didn't give off the warm fuzzies. It was towards the end of my freshman year when we had a little altercation after a game for me to realize that he was a good guy who cared about his players. Becky said about having our backs, and he literally and figuratively had my back along with Becky that day when there were some punches thrown. And Frank literally kind of threw me down and huddled over top of me and took some punches. It proved that day, just like Beck said, that he totally had our backs. He was there for us. He was the kind of coach that you wanted to play for. He didn't sugarcoat stuff. If you weren't doing your job, he pretty much told you you weren't doing your job. And but he had this way of making it okay, told you what you were doing wrong, and then told you to go back in and how to fix it. And usually he was right and you could fix it. He wasn't afraid to let the officials know if they weren't calling a good game. And then again, he was going to protect his players, even if that meant he ended up watching the rest of the game from the bus. Frank was one of those people that you loved to play for, but you hated playing against, because he always had something up his sleeve. Like Leo said, he always remembered that one thing that you could do to stop somebody, that one thing that they did that you knew how to defend. After graduating from high school, I was lucky enough to come back and watch many soccer games because my younger sister was playing. It was fun to watch and enjoy Frank from the other side of the field, and to hear the comments about him from the other side of the field. During my senior year in college, Jen called me and said that we were starting a junior high soccer program here at SCA, and she wanted to know if I would be interested in coaching with her. Jen and I were lucky enough to come back to our alma mater and coach with Frank. He was much more than just a coach. He was a teacher, and in the 10 years that followed, he taught Jen and I so much about the game. We would start by talking and asking him questions, and usually, by the end of the conversation, he was asking us what we thought and how we could fix it. Frank wasn't officially a junior high soccer coach, but he ended up at most of our practices and games, because he wanted to see what was in store. I know that the best and most meaningful comments come from Frank when he told us that the girls looked very good, that they could play with some varsity teams he's seen. That coming from him meant so much. We were doing something right. I'm sorry. We were fortunate enough this past spring to hold our very first Frank Fullmer Memorial Junior High Tournament. We lost our first game. It was a tough loss, but we came back to win that tournament, the championship game, 5-0. It was a day that Jen and I were so proud with. There were so many great things that day that happened. And it only seemed fitting that we were the ones to win the first tournament, and won it in such a hard-nosed fighting way. Frank's way. I am truly grateful because for the past 4 years, I got to call Frank not just my coach and teacher, but also my friend and next door neighbor. DJ and I moved in right before Christmas, and it didn't take, much past January for me to come to know that if I couldn't find DJ, or he went outside to do something, and didn't come back for an hour, it's because he and Frank were out back solving the world's problems. And if you know Frank, he wasn't always politically correct with him. But that was okay, because usually he and Deej had the same opinion, so they got along well. there, we've also brought home two precious boys. And Frank and Rosie were there to enjoy all the fun. The nights of screaming, the yelling just because. Frank would always say that he couldn't hold the boys because they were too great. Well, a little before our oldest Carter's first birthday, we were at a game here, and I looked over in the tower, and who has Carter but Frank, sitting there holding him. Frank cared about my boys. He always wanted to feed them, or make Rosie go downstairs to get the fun toys out of the basement because they always wanted to play. He and Rosie would bring treats for the boys whenever they traveled. I have a lobster and a stuffed moose to prove it in my house. Once I had the boys, it became clear that Frank really wasn't that big grizzly bear, but in fact, he was a giant teddy bear. He cared about my family and I have no doubt would have done anything for us if we needed it. He loved my kids, and he made them feel special, and for that and so much more, I can't say thank you enough. Thanks for sharing that, Rosie.
Class of 2004, Hillary Roth.
Okay, guys, so bear with me. Not only do I follow her, but I'm 2 months postpartum, so I'm So, we've all heard of a Renaissance man. And for me, Frank was a true Renaissance coach. In some aspects, his leadership was very direct, like Aaron alluded to. He told you exactly what he wanted from you, and he made sure you did it. Like running with a gallon of water on your back, or jumping 2 ropes during the beef tape battle, or eating your approved 4 carb to 1 protein ratio snack. And believe me, I memorized those snack ratios freshman year. Just the exact amount of peanut butter to each cracker. However, his coaching transcended just making demands of his players. He had a subtle way of giving you the autonomy to decide that you wanted to succeed. For him, you wanted to run a little further. You wanted to stay a little longer. You wanted to play a little harder. And you wanted to give your best and be your best. Not just for yourself, but for him. He inspired dedication and respect because he gave it. And he made Southern Girls Soccer feel larger than life. His lessons on the field transcended our high school game and continue to guide us in all aspects of our lives, as I think we can see in testament to how many girls continue to come here. Now, a true Renaissance man is an innovator, and that's exactly what Frank was. He was incessantly reinventing our training, from the crazy aggression game that I think went by the wayside when Kate Starbucks broke Jen Stein's arm, to our ritualistic spitting on the Danville Bridge for good juju. And in true Renaissance fashion, Frank did not run screaming in the opposite direction when 5 18-year-old girls approached him to say that they wanted to take an entire soccer team of 30 girls into the woods to camp for 3 days. That's right, sorry girls, that 9-miler came from us. So, he didn't even grudgingly agree. He actually jumped head first into the idea and made it into the most awesome team-building survival weekend that forged strong, resilient women and molded them into a true team. It's also essential that a Renaissance coach be flexible, roll with the punches. And poor Frank sure had to do a lot of that for previous years with us girls. The one that comes to mind is a 5 a.m. sleepover at Michelle Kirk's down the road from Rosie and Frank. And at 5 a.m. we were, just getting done with our night. We decided it would be a good idea to take some toilet paper rolls to Frank's house. So 30-plus girls headed on down the road full of sugar and caffeine to toilet paper Rosie and Frank's house. We cock-a-doodle-dooed at 5 a.m. Rosie and Frank were up making coffee, and they just invited us in for breakfast. So that surly exterior was really just a facade once you got to the bottom of it. Poor Rosie and Frank were safe to put up with what we made them go through. Many of you may know that Frank was a coach, a loving father and husband, a camper, a hiker, a Volvo driver to a fault. But as a Renaissance man, you knew he was also a hairstylist. On the first Fateful Po Valley trip, one wild-eyed, curly-haired girl, Jen Miller, had a total breakdown over her tangled mess of unwashed hair without a shower. And what else would Frank and Derek do but haul her out to the utility sink, and wash her hair for her in the middle of the woods. That was the silliest sight to behold, two grown men washing this crazy girl's massive hair. I have not seen this hair rivaled since, but it was a true lesson in civic leadership. All in all, Frank created and fostered a program through which we as young girls experienced our own leadership, developing into strong, independent, and passionate young women who continue to carry his legacy through our lives. It's only fitting that his legacy should live on this field, where he spent countless hours and millions of cups of coffee, yelling and coaxing, consoling, and celebrating so many very lucky players. And now it's our turn to celebrate him.
For the class of 2014, Jess Watkins.
A little over a year ago today, I lost one of the most influential people I've ever met in my entire life. I will forever remember Frank.
Okay, Jess, let it flow, Jess.
Okay. I will forever remember Frank as an outstanding irreplaceable coach, and also one of the one-of-a-kind person he truly was. Frank not only gave me all the skills to be a great goalkeeper, but he also He also shaped me into the person I have become today. He showed me how to be fearless in any situation, how to be bold and go after what I set my mind to, how to have confidence in myself and hold my head up, and of course how to be sarcastic without cracking a smile. But most importantly, Frank taught me how to be a leader on the soccer field and off, and because of him, I'm never afraid to step up to any situation or challenge. Something many people never get to truly learn. I'm so thankful to have somebody to be able to embody some of the qualities that Frank possessed and carry those pieces of him with me throughout every single day. Anyone who had the pleasure of getting to spend some quality time with Frank will quickly recall his witty, lighthearted side, as we all have. My teammates and I were lucky enough to spend many hours around Frank listening to his home remedies on how to avoid a Charlie horse, listening to the latest thing he had spent all night researching, hosting an intense game of the Lumberjack Challenge, or simply telling us hilarious stories. Frank was often able to bring light to a solemn situation. When I got injured my senior year and landed myself in a stay in the hospital, Frank came to visit me that same night. He walks into the room bringing his undying sense of sarcasm, and without hesitation asked me, "What in the hell are you doing here?" It's still hard for me to accept the fact that Frank is no longer here with me. I'm sure today, as I sit and watch the game, it'll feel weird not to hear his voice coming from the sidelines. I'll personally miss him yelling at the refs or loudly laughing at what he thought was a bad call. I don't think any of my teammates will ever forget when he got kicked out of the game, and instead of going home, Frank simply stood behind the chain link fence just a few feet away from the sidelines. Frank never let getting a card or getting kicked out of a soccer game from coming to watch his team play. Those games he couldn't be with us down the field, he reminded us that the hills have eyes as he watched from his car. Although it still hurts to know he's no longer here, I'm beyond grateful that some of the best and most memorable years of my life were spent with Frank. I'm so thankful and proud to be able to say I've played soccer for Southern Columbia and that I was coached by the great Frank Fullmer. His legacy will forever be deeply rooted in this amazing soccer program, and my fond memories of him will always hold a special place in my heart. Thank you.
Class of 2002, current teacher, current coach, Jennifer Stone.
Well, I stand in front of people and talk for 8 hours a day. This is not the same, so please bear with me. They say a journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with a single step. For any of us who had the opportunity to play for Frank, that single step was more like a plunge. You never knew what you were getting yourself into. At times you questioned whether you should be there, but in the end, you never wanted it to stop. For me, it all started in 1997, before half my current players were born. With a single phone call, Frank said to Derek, "Hey, can Jen play in a tournament this weekend?" Derek said, "Hey, do you know she's 12? And in typical fashion, Frank responded with, "Yeah, you think I care?" So on that weekend in June, I found out quickly what I was getting into. And many of you will not be surprised. We won a lot. We really didn't lose. There was an altercation, physical, might I know. And many of you will not be surprised we walked off the field on the last game. That's where the question was, what am I doing, popped into my head, but shortly after I realized the journey had just begun. Like so many of these people who just spoke before me, I could stand here all day and share with you memories that I had playing high school soccer for Frank. Many of you sitting here today could do the same. Although we span many years, many different teams, although many of you don't know the generations that came before you or those that came after you, I can guarantee our fondest memories of high school soccer all have one common theme. Frank's impact on us as players and people, but more importantly, his ridiculous sense of humor that we all enjoyed but could never quite understand. For many of you, your journey stopped when you graduated high school and moved on from the game. All you really carried with you were those memories. For Aaron and I, our journey may have been a million miles, but it never took us that far from home. Both of us have the unique experience of coaching alongside Frank. In some ways, nothing changed at all. But in many ways, we were let into his world, and I do say his world, that just isn't quite understood as a player. He worked tirelessly, assessing games, watching game film, and planning practice. Sometimes he worked so hard on designing a drill, he would show us the drawing the next day of practice, and myself and Aaron and my dad would say, "What is that?" You couldn't understand it. There were lines everywhere, but he knew exactly what it meant. One of the most important things everybody remembers from Frank is his honesty. Although sometimes blunt, you always knew where you stood with him. Whether you were another coach, a player, or an official, he always had some sort of comment that let you know exactly what he was thinking. Today I want to share with you some of those quotes that a lot of us hear in the back of our mind very often. As Becky stated, besides winning, there was not much that was more important to Frank than a good solid dinner after practice or a game. So when the end of practice was drawing near, we always heard, "Come on, Rosie's making pork chops for dinner." And if you didn't know any better, you'd think poor Rosie only knew how to make pork chops. And on game day, before the game ever started, teams on the field warming up, Frank would look at Derek and say, "Hey, where are we going to eat after the game?" So besides food, Frank always liked a good solid play. And for some reason, those smooth plays by defenders always got him going. And after that hearty laugh that he always had, that I'm sure you're all hearing in your brain right now, he would yell, "The doctor is in the house." Or when one of his goalkeepers made a great save, it was, "She just ate her lunch and her snack too." Frank also loved a physical game. But when he thought something might not really have been a foul, you always heard, "I think that's a 9.5 from the Russian judge," as if we were actually watching a diving meet. Although we hope not to hear the next couple often, some of my favorites were unfortunately when Frank was mad. How dare the opposing team ever cross midfield? Or we would hear, "That's a goal," even when the play was not remotely dangerous. Or by all means, someone make a mistake within 30 seconds of entering the game, and Frank would be throwing his notebook down, yelling, "Get her out of the game!" But you really knew you were in for it, and Frank looked at you, and he pointed at you, and he said, "Step into my office." These quotes are some of the best memories I have of Frank. They were an excellent mix of everything he embodied. A passion for the game, a love for food, and a knack for sarcasm, which I know my mother did not appreciate that I got that quality from him. But as many of us know, Frank was a perfectionist. If it was 99%, it wasn't good enough. That was a theme of every drill, every practice, and every game. And that's where we get our most famous quote. Frank always encouraged us by saying, "Let's end on a good note." Some people tell me that I remind them of Frank. I'm not sure what aspect they mean, but I'll take it as a compliment. It was a privilege and an honor to be one of Frank's players, to coach with him, and most importantly, to be his friend. I'm blessed to have those memories, and it saddens me every day to know that my current players will not have the same fond memories that I do. However, I can guarantee that he would love to have seen the growth that Miss Haley Levan made from a crying freshman when he yelled at her to a senior captain and phenomenal player. And I'm sure he would have been very proud to watch his little buddy Jill Marks start in her first varsity game as a freshman, and I'm sure afterward he would have asked her where his pickles were. No matter how old or how young, whether you knew Frank through soccer or as a friend, which he claimed he only had 3, I think this is a testament to the fact that he was wrong, I can guarantee that you are glad to share a part of your journey with Frank. Just a little over a year ago, shortly after Frank passed, I stood on this field with my dad, and it didn't feel right being here without him. But the irony of it was that if we wouldn't have been there, it would have been totally wrong. Today I am proud that we can all share together in this amazing field dedication, so that from today forward, every Southern Columbia player who didn't have the opportunity to be coached by Frank can still feel his presence as they too begin to embark on their million-mile journey. Thank you.
I'd like to have Frank's son Ian come up.
All right. Thank you guys all for being here today to share this dedication with us. It means a whole lot to us and our family. Thank you to everybody in the program that helped make this possible. Now, my dad started this program back in '94. Virtually nobody playing soccer today was even born yet. And that's how long ago this was. Now, at that time, I was 8 years old, which for me, what that meant, I was automatically drafted as the go-to manager for the soccer program. I was in charge of setting up all the cone drills that Jen described on the field. I also had to go through watching tirelessly the training with the Ajax videos at home, so we knew what to do. And that also meant I was the managerial person in charge of making sure that the sidelines always had a fresh ball for when people had to throw one in. Now, it's also around this time that my sister Amber over there, she was about ready to get started with her freshman year of soccer. Okay? Now, when you look around today, the soccer community has changed quite a bit since what it was when we first got started, especially with the field behind us here today. A lot of players today may not realize that this wasn't the first soccer field that Southern had. Okay, you guys had to ride on a bus and go over to the Catawissa Legion to play your soccer games. It was also this time that the girls team, you guys didn't have those nice uniforms you had today. It was those yellow kind of generic uniforms, looked like bumblebees. They had stripes. The numbers would always just kind of fall off. I remember Becky's number was always falling off, probably because people were trying to like kill her. Okay, it was during this time period when Derek started coaching. He had an old Isuzu SUV that became the Soccermobile, and I know a lot of people probably don't even know that that's actually a car brand anymore because they're just so dated. It's also the time throughout the years that apples, baked goods, brownies, and whoopie pies, and his patented light blue peppermint Wrigley's gum, they were all dietary staples on the sideline. So over that time, Southern went from a newly formed program to what it is today as a district and state contender. So many things changed as the program evolved, but one of the things that remained constant was Frank's involvement and Frank's leadership and my dad's passion for the girls program here at Southern. Now, as some of the girls can attest, everybody knew that my dad was a personality that just attracted people towards him. Okay, so much that even the refs always tended to like to be around him in his general presence. Okay, and when it came to soccer, my dad always had a way of getting the best out of the players throughout the years. He had a knack for making them compete on the highest level and realize their full potential within themselves. His dedication to the program allowed him to not only help his players understand the tactics and the systems within the games of soccer, but also how to persevere during times of adversity, how to never settle mediocrity. Sorry. And to always strive for excellence within themselves and within their teammates. It was with this mindset that my dad helped develop the winning culture that is the program today. The relationship and buy-in that he created with his players, it cannot be understated. Successful programs on any sport and any level typically have one commonality, and that is they have a team who is willing to believe in their coach and a coach that believes in his team. For 21 years, my dad was that piece of the puzzle that helped mold this program into what it is today. Now, with Frank gone and my dad no longer here, Derek and Jen have the charge to lead this program into the future with the foundations first installed by a welder who wanted to start a program to watch his daughter play soccer 21 years ago. Now, from the bottom of our hearts, and the Fullmer family. We're honored to be here today as the school dedicates the field in his honor as the Frank Fullmer Memorial Soccer Field. Now, even though he's not on the bench in his typical normal assigned seat, which he always had, his tradition and message is still clear. That is, win or lose, play to your potential, strive for excellence within yourself in everything that you do, and always end on a good note.
On behalf of the school district, we'd like to thank everybody for coming, Frank's family, friends, and former coaches. What a great ceremony. You know he's looking right now at that clock and said, we have a game. What are we doing this? But again, I'd like to thank everybody and for coming. And we do want to end up on a good note. And we'd like to have all current players and any past players who may have played for Frank. We'd like to come down, get in front of the sign. We'd like to get some photos and end this thing on a good night. Thank you for coming.